expense. So it's something, it's a good idea, the root barrier, or root removal or whatever.
So in terms of an action item, we need something on terms of a plan for decreasing the damage caused by maturing hardwoods or the maturing sterling oaks throughout the community. I'm trying to phrase it in a way that is not specific to removal of the hardwoods, but would capture, first priority would be establishing root barriers to decrease the damage. And there, in some cases, there might be isolated need for the removal, but some guidance and framework for maintaining the community with regard to the hardwoods throughout.
And I'm not even sure it's just hardwoods. What was that destroyed, that got in under the tennis courts? What?
It was the ficus shrubs.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be just hardwoods. It could be some of the shrubs that we're putting into, right?
Right. Good point. Does anybody know if the county still requires?
I'm sorry, does Collier County still have the mandate to replace a hardwood if you remove one?
Yes.
That's current?
For certain land?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're certain of that? Hasn't changed in the last year or two?
I'm certain of it for single family homeowner properties. But that they have to have one. It's not, if you have two and remove one, you don't have to replace it. But every property has to have a shade tree, which are most hardwoods. But how many we have to have in the common area will have to be researched.
Are they enforcing it?
They only enforce it if we report it, but the ASC has been enforcing it. Unfortunately, most of the replacements, however, have been the Dahoon hollies or something like that, which are not really shade trees. And I want to point out that, as Paul mentioned earlier, the canopies of the shade trees are very valuable, especially to full-time residents. Walking around here in the summer is really great when you can walk in the shade of a tree, and much less so when the sun is not blocked on the blacktop.
Yes, Linda.
I just got one quick thing. Suzanne, I remember quite a few years ago, I think you put out a list of hardwoods that were acceptable, shrubs or plants that were acceptable, flowers, native. That came from the office. Do you remember that?
It's just hardwoods. It doesn't have any shrubs or plants.
Okay, you had a list of that, and you also had a list, I remember getting it, a list of native plants that could be put in yards. Do you remember that at all?
I mean, Collier County might have a list of native plants, but it's not a Sterling Oaks document.
I think that's what it was. It wasn't, it was a link from Collier County, and like Lanny said, the native plant.
Oh, it was the link.
Yeah.
Okay, because I remember seeing it. Okay, thank you.
Things like that link will be good if we provide some type of document that provides guidance to homeowners,
Yeah.
condo associations. Okay, so we'll need to develop a plan for hardwood maintenance. What other issues do we need to address in terms of landscaping improvements besides irrigation? Paul.
This one I think we can share with the next item under health and wellness and so forth, but I'll throw it out here. And that is an extension of the current preserve walk, maybe up to 100 feet a year, but to develop a little bit like the Corkscrew Sanctuary boardwalk, where we identify flora and fauna along the way, and we begin to extend the walk into the preserve, which is a natural gem that we have here in the community. And I think if possible, we should take advantage and develop that area, because certainly we have a lot of acreage back there. Now we'll be limited as to how much we can develop as a boardwalk, but that's okay because we don't want to bite off too much. So even 100 feet a year would be beneficial, I think, and could come under the landscaping plan, and it could also come under the wellness and fitness thing, and we can talk about that in the next section. But as far as landscaping is concerned, I think flora and fauna identification and an extension of the preserve would come under a landscape plan.
Good. Lanny?
Linked to that is firstly repairing what's out there. We have an awful lot of rotted and termite infested timbers out there. I don't remember offhand what's in the reserve plan for those timbers, but that should be looked into. And if it's not in the reserve study, it should be added.
There is some ongoing yearly maintenance, I think, but it's minimal. I know that Alan and I were out there a couple weeks ago, and once he gets finished with his projects that he had to get done while there was no rain, he is planning to go out there and replace some of the boardwalk that is getting old, like you said.
A lot of our residents don't even know that it exists. So I think this is an opportunity to refurbish and expand what we do have, and it could be quite a gem for the community.
Good point. Linda?
Yes, ask a question first. Mark, on either side of the monument, is there room for that to be dug out more to enhance that monument sign with more flowers and, you know, shrubs and things like that, hedges, low hedges? I mean, can we extend that out to make that a little more dramatic on our front entrance?
We don't cut
There's
the summit
there's a lot
line.
that can be done. I stopped the spending. One of the things that need to be done that's currently holding up anything that's out there on the monuments is a survey by the survey company to be able to have planning documents, because if any changes to those areas have to be permitted with regards to Collier County. So the $1,000 that it was going to take to do the survey to move that along was held up because of our discretionary spending situation at this point in time. I've met with the engineers, the landscape architects, and they all said that there was a number of things that could be done to the front entrance there, but it would all have to take a survey plan. It would also have to take another, permitting and document that would have to be ready for Collier County. So that's on hold until such time that we want to spend some money.
Mhm. So if we want to add flowers, we have to get a permit?
No, I don't think so, but I think that you wouldn't want to do anything out there right now and add more money to the situation until such time as we have an overall plan. I don't think it's worth changing the beds that are there when we know that there may be other things that can be done down the road that would be a much better enhancement to that specific area than just adding more flowers to that one bed or two.
Mhm. Mm.
'Cause it'll require irrigation changes and everything else. So.
Okay. How about fountains? Are we out? I know a lot of people would like to see another fountain in the entrance coming in.
I think that's all discretionary spending.
I know, but is it part of a plan?
Long-term.
Right. That's a good point to raise. Jack, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're getting in the weeds here again. So.
Well,
Not really.
no, enhancements to the monument, without talking about it, in too detail, is something that did come up in the survey in terms of more of a wow factor for the front entrance. So I think that is an area that we can look into, as Mark's accurately pointing out. We don't want to put in more plantings without ensuring that a survey was done to have us understand what will be needed longer term, and then looking at it from an irrigation perspective.
Mhm.
Then the fountains throughout the community was the topic that came up. Is there an opportunity to add more fountains to different locations?
Mhm.
Terry.
Yeah, I think I've kind of parrot along with Lindia. I think that before we go ahead and add different fountains, I think that enhancing the fountain in front of the clubhouse would be a very, very promising thing, because although when you walk very close to it, it's very pretty to look at from afar, you really, it's virtually unrecognizable. So I think something more formidable could be attempted and would enhance the area greatly.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of a long-term plan for landscape, I think that's a good point.
Mhm.
So we're saying that we want to come up with a plan for fountains.
Well, maybe the existing ones, and I think the one Terry is referring to is the water feature in front of the clubhouse.
Correct.
It's kind of overgrown, and it's inconspicuous almost, unless you're dead on in front of it. It's difficult to spot. So I think we need some enhancements there. And I would add also that if we have a plan for fountains through the community, I think the one that's currently out front, the latest one we added, I think if we could trade it in and get a larger one, I think that would make the point we were trying to make. I was a little discouraged when I saw the fountain. Not so much that I don't like it, but that it was smaller, and the spectacular effect I was looking for just wasn't there because of the height. So if we could exchange that one, move it somewhere else, or change it, trade it in for a bigger model, I would recommend that.
Well, I tell you from the fountain folks that actually do it, they measure out the area of the spray. We could go to a completely different fountain that is more tall and magnificent. The problem is any wind or anything else like that, the larger the fountain, the more the spray. So we were trying to keep the spray from not going into the preserve and not going into the lawns, because it is sort of a narrow and elongated area. We have it in the widest point right now, and the fountain that we have out there, even though you can't see it, it's got a diameter somewhere around 40 feet as a spray going out and 35 feet high. It just doesn't look that because it's kind of down in the lake. Because the lakes are down about 6 or 8 feet too. So when you're up in the roadway, it looks like it's down in the hole. But we could look at a different type of fountain that has a more direct spray up, but not so much out like that.
Yeah, I think that
Terry,
would do
then
the trick
Chap,
for
and then
me.
back to Paul.
Yeah, Mark, instead of getting a different fountain, suppose we were able to get a more powerful pump, and maybe that could raise the fountain higher and solve the problem with the least amount of money.
Yeah, again, Mark is already talking about they're relying on expert opinion to facilitate that. Chap?
Yeah, what I want to talk about probably didn't even show up on the survey because I don't know if anybody's been thinking about it. But pretty soon we're going to have hundreds of people in these new apartments. And I'm not really too familiar with what's the barrier, if any, that currently exists to, what should I say, protect our homeowners who have property that back up to these apartments.
So that's a good point, Chap. In fact, that is one of the discussion points here under this category. But before we focus on that a little bit more, Paul, did you want to add any last thoughts on the fountains?
No, just wondering how Lindia feels about it since it's her fountain.
You are so mean.
I started that, Lindy, so don't blame Paul.
I know you did. So we really discussed this and I fought hard to get a higher, taller one because I said the banks are high and the water's down and we need a higher one. So we were with, what was the company that did it, Mark?
Doesn't matter.
The
Doesn't
Lake
matter.
Doctors?
Lake Doctors, thank
Yeah, the
you.
Lake
Yeah,
Doctors.
so they're the experts. So they said, no, this is the only kind, and this is the thing you have to get. So now I'm out at a community. I rode out last night, as a matter of fact, to Bonita Grand, out Bonita Beach Road. A new community going in on the left called the Seasons. They've got 3 fountains on their entrance. And guess what? They've got a great big tall one. And then coming out the sides are shorter ones. So they're, in diameter, they are shorter, they're smaller. So they're not throwing out into a big wide area, and that just the tall one is going up and it shoots up and it's beautiful. And I said, there. Everybody said, oh no, you can't get one that goes that high. But I think you can. I mean, when the wind blows, the water goes anyway. I mean, it's going to go farther than normal when the wind blows.
Okay, so clearly then this is an item that we'll put on our action steps to explore, enhancements to fountains, whether that's the one in front of the clubhouse or the one in the lake. We definitely want to have some attention on this topic for landscaping enhancements throughout the community. Now let's return to the point that Chap made, although I think he left the room.
No, I'm here.
With that is with the new apartment complex. On one of the discussion points, there is a mention of a need to create some type of barrier. Maybe that is done through some type of hedge plantings, but is there a need to address creating a buffer for those new apartments with the community? We'll go to Lindy and then you, Mark.
Oh, well, Mark knows more than I do about this. So we've been down there, Mark and I and the landscape committee. We've planted, first of all, there's a fence, our fence. Then we have a hedge. And that has been planted and that's very high in some places. So it's very good. And then we have an agreement, or not an agreement, but we have a promise from the apartments that they're also planting a row of trees, right, Mark? I don't know.
Mark, you're on mute. Take yourself off mute.
He can't hear you.
Sorry about that. My phone's ringing out people are calling and so I had to mute, so otherwise it'd be interrupting.
We're
Yes,
talking about the hedge between the apartments. What do they do?
the landscaping plan for the Versal on their southern border next to their swale is oak trees with shrubbery. And that should be being installed, I would say, anytime now. That's the landscaping buffer plan that was part of their original PUD that was approved by the city of Bonita Springs.
Good, maybe we could take credit for it.
Okay.
If
I'm gonna go to Chap and then to Lanny.
If Versal does what they're supposed to do in combination with what we have already done with our hedges, do we have an issue that needs to be addressed?
The people that are complaining are the people that are in the upstairs apartments that look out over the treetops. And there's just nothing that can be planted that would be 50 to 60 feet high that would create a barrier that would manage that situation. The only thing we can help for is the trees that grow over in Versal start to mute and mitigate some of that view.
Right, so we can't rush time, but what's necessary has already been begun. Lanny?
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue. If people do what they said they're going to do.
Right. I'm gonna let Lanny's been waiting patiently.
I suggest that we can include in this document the need to assess the adequacy of the landscaping both at Versal and at All Seasons, because All Seasons is developing, but we actually have that community also impacting some of our homeowners.
Good idea. And Paul, we could take some credit for it.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna have an action item, as you said, Lanny, to explore the adequacy. All right, is there anything else that you thought of or that you see looking under the discussion points that we haven't talked about with regard to landscaping? Paul?
I think part of the landscaping plan needs to address the condo coach entrance area, that whole area around the mailboxes. More than half of the community daily comes through that access point, access egress. And the area needs some attention. It has been given some attention over the past few years, but the maintenance of the area needs attention. Some of the plantings of recent years have become woody. I don't know if it's an irrigation problem, maybe some competition with the larger mature trees in that area. But it definitely should have some attention along the way. As I said, more than half the population of Sterling Oaks moves through that particular area every day. The mailboxes are there and the entrance to the condo coach homes are there. So people come and go constantly. And it's not pretty. If we're going
Is
to
that
do-
common areas for the community or is that part?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Lanny?
I support that going on the list. Several years ago, the landscaping committee recommended actually building some planters because we did not think that any new plantings would do well in the ground because of all the roots there. And as well as some hardscape in the area so that the paths don't get trodden. So I think that should go on the list for some major improvement.
Good. Any other thoughts? All right. In terms of landscaping, I want to summarize the main action items that we want to be focused on. Now, for the sake of time today, I'll take it and word it into here's the action item, here's the desired outcome, or and then we'll have to later on identify who are, some will be the art committee, some will be the landscaping committee, some might be the GM, who will be responsible for implementation, and then we can attach some ideas if there's going to be any costs involved. But the topics that we focused on were improvements, a long-term plan for improvements to the common areas. We've talked about coming up with some guidance and information for homeowners as to determining when a plant needs to be replaced and what type of plants to replace it with. And in terms of the quality of lawn maintenance. And for both of those, we're going to try to use some outside expertise, whether that's the Florida Native Plant Society or the University of Florida Extension Services or Collier County Extension Services to provide some assistance. We talked about the coming up with a plan for maintaining the hardwoods within the community. And with that, we're talking about reducing some of the damage caused by the root structures, both of hardwoods and other plantings. We mentioned specifically ficus have an extended root structure as well. We talked about the extensions of the preserve walk, maintaining and refurbishing and expanding the preserve walk as a function of time. And then we talked about the creating more of a pop or a wow in terms of the front entrance through landscaping, and we'll have some steps that'll be involved with accomplishing that. And then a plan for the fountains, and then assessing the buffers between Sterling Oaks and All Seasons and Versailles. So those were, and then finally the coach homes entrance area, and providing some attention to that. So we come up with a pretty thorough listing of action items that we need to address in terms of our plans. I'm going to go to Paul and then to you, Mike.
And one more thing, that it's not super critical, but I'm concerned about the white in the community, the PVC white. Several years ago, we began to soften the visual blow as you walk by replacing mailboxes in the community. We had all white mailboxes, and we changed to a very neutral green. And I think that whole thing was successful. And I think as part of landscaping, we should try to minimize as much of the plastic white glare in the community that we can. And it may be fronting them with pitch apples or some kind of shrubbery that could reduce the amount of glare we have from the white PVC.
Other comments on that point before I go to Mike? Okay, Mike.
We talked a little bit about broad-based standards. Was that, I don't know where you put that in that plan.
Right.
That would be with the homeowners component in terms of some broad-based standards.
Okay.
So we want to create those standards, communicate those standards, and then empower the ARC to try to enforce those standards.
Right.
So it'd be a long-term 3-step process. So any other thoughts in terms of landscaping? This is a good thorough list. And some of these will have, of course, as we go through, it doesn't need to be the entire group, an item like Mike is just pointing out in terms of homeowners landscaping standards or guidance, we can have sub-action items within that. So there'll be, other bullet points in terms of the steps necessary to accomplish the broader action item. All right, let's turn our attention to the second area, and that area is the community well-being. Community well-being is a broad area. If you look at your strategic plan, we really focused in on 4 specific areas. And that was the community safety, that was sustainability, fitness and wellness, and becoming a blue zone community. As 4 key areas under the heading of community well-being. So let's talk about community safety to begin. Chat.
I think this is pretty uncontroversial. If I look at this entire list, everything, safety, sustainability, fitness, wellness, blue zone, there's one item that without question is top of the mind for a lot of our residents that we need a plan for, and that is speeding.
Right.
That is, to me, just a separate, a standalone major issue as it relates to community wellness. And we need some kind of plan to try to control it. That's all I have to say.
So we do know that we need to develop a speeding control plan. So
absolutely.
What is the first step for addressing this issue?
Paul?
I don't know.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I'm not sure that this shouldn't be part of the current plan, not a strategic plan, but maybe a line in a strategic plan for how to continue to address it.
Right. So as you pointed out, you as a board have that already as your agenda items to be addressing. So it's already currently an issue that the board is focused on. But in terms of its importance and in terms of a longer term addressing of the issue, it could still fall under a strategic plan. Terry.
Yeah, one of the things that I think needs to be mentioned is that I think that as an organization, we can set up a right-of-way proposal which says simply that bicycles and walkers have right-of-way on all of our private roads, which means very simply, if there's somebody walking across the street, the driver should stop. If somebody is riding their bicycle, the driver of a car has the responsibility to move past in a safe manner. That is inherent in the rules of the road here in Florida and actually almost every place in the United States. But I don't think we've ever spelled it out as a community.
Okay, good point. Lindia.
I think a couple of things might help. I think a couple of little signs added to the stop sign that say children in the neighborhood, or some of those signs, be careful of our children, or something like that, psychologically is very good for drivers. I also think that you could make actual walkways where Sanctuary tees in there into Sanctuary Point Court, right there going across the main thorough, where you could have zigzag lines there or something, so that in addition to the stop sign, you know that there's a walkway going across. I think visuals like that throughout the community, different places, especially mentioning children or pets or something like that, would be a very good thing to help. I also think that bicyclists should know that they're supposed to follow the rules of the automobile. They're supposed to stop at stop signs, and they don't. And they should drive the correct way, and they should follow traffic, and they shouldn't drive their bicycles on the sidewalk. So I mean, I think there are things like that that they could be reminded, some rules of the road.
Good. Lanny and then Brownie.
Just a modification, Lindia. We discussed this a couple of years ago, and our rules do permit bicycles to ride on sidewalks.
Right.
They do.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, okay. I didn't know that.
Brownie.
Yeah. I think because of the speeding problem, that it's sometimes unsafe to be on the road.
Okay.
Okay. We've been riding more on the roads because there's so many more walkers now. So, I mean, and this is why I really think we should start to address this speeding problem at our board meeting next week, and not wait for the conclusion of this plan.
Right. Go ahead, Brown.
Okay. One of the things that I don't understand, we have sidewalks, we shave them down, try to keep the bumps off. But I would say 3/4, particularly our people want to walk in the middle of the streets. And I don't quite understand, we talk about the speeding problem, which we have, but certainly I don't understand why people do not walk on the sidewalks. And I know other day I was driving out, there were like a group of 5 or 6 people having a little discussion in the middle of the roadway. And pedestrians have the right of way, but on the other hand, we shouldn't be having people walking out in the middle of the road, particularly if we have a speeding problem.
Paul and then Lanny.
A couple things. I think over the summer and into the fall, very early fall, we'll be beginning a repaving project in the community. And I think as we begin to repave, we should look at the current stop signs and speed signs that we have. And maybe this is the time to replace them with some smart signs. Ones that will indicate how fast you're going and flash that speed at you. Maybe flash if you're going over the speed limit, or let's say 3, 4, 5 miles over the speed limit. And I think that would help deter some of the speeding. And to get to Lanny's point, we would be addressing that sooner rather than later. The other thing is, I think we should assess our speed bumps along the way, because some of them are hardly bumps at all. And the community doesn't like jarring speed bumps, yet they insist on having speed bumps. So I think we need to reassess what we do have and what we should have in terms of speed bumps along the way. I think these two things, in combination with the road repaving, might address some of the problem initially and very quickly. So I think we have that to look at. I think another thing we could do as we study this situation is look at the possibility down the road, I'm not saying right off, but the possibility of roundabouts in certain areas in the community. We have concern about people stopping. Roundabouts definitely slow traffic and control the traffic, and it could eliminate a lot of the speeding also. Something to think about if we're thinking about a plan down the road. So for what it's worth, that's what I have to offer on the speeding issue.
Good. And then the only other thing besides the points you made, Paul, were the points made earlier about the need to communicate as to what are the standards for
Right,
pedestrians and bicyclists.
right.
Who else had their hand up? Brownie, were you going to add something? Then I'll come to you, Lanny.
Okay.
Brownie.
All of this is not new. I live here near the back gate and get a lot of, being on Sterling Oaks, a lot of speeding. The stop signs that we do have at the last 2 points were a result of actions that I got the board to take about 8 or 9 years ago. It helps a little bit. At that time, there was great resistance to any more speed bumps. But we keep talking about the community doesn't want speed bumps. But look, if they're going to speed, and we've been through this for 10 years, we can talk about signs and walkways and all of that. You know, we're going to have to bite the bullet and put in some more speed bumps. They do work, and we can't say the community doesn't want them. On the other hand, we want to have safety. So, and cut the speeding out. I think we need to face up to it. We're going to have to do it even though they're not popular.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to need to assess speed bumps. And of course, there's alternatives to the speed bumps. And we're getting the wording where it's wide, like 6 feet wide, as opposed to a speed bump with a slight rise that you go over, and things of that nature as well. Lanny, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you. First, Brownie, to address your question about people walking in the middle of the road, this does not relate to the group you talked about, but I have seen more people in the middle of the road because they're avoiding people on the sidewalk because of the COVID incident. My other question is, Paul, I'm trying to, just for thinking about things, where do you think we have enough room for a roundabout? Because they of course take a great deal of room at an intersection.
There's no plan.
Again,
Yeah, I think
that.
I recommended a study. I'm not suggesting we move ahead and do that.
Right.
I think,
I'm just wondering where you think it's possible.
well, I think Willow Bend is one area. Another area would be the Preserve and Deer Creek. Another one would be the main area as you come in before you turn toward Wildcat or off the other direction. I think there are probably at least 3 areas where you could possibly do that.
I don't think there's enough space.
Yeah, well, that's
homeowner property is really close.
If there isn't enough space, you wouldn't do it. But if there is, it's a possibility.
I'm looking at the other items that were listed under safety, service vehicles, parking on the road. That's a hard one to address.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Lanny?
I know that in terms of service vehicles, I know someone in Wildcat, and the landscaper trucks consistently park across from her home on a regular basis, even when they're not working in that part of Wildcat. So there may be some issues there of spreading out. It makes it difficult for her to get in and out of her driveway.
Was that Leo's or is that Brightview?
It was Leo regularly. I saw the Brightview truck there 2 days ago, I guess, a couple of days ago when I was riding.
Okay.
Jack?
I know that they have limited areas.
Why don't we just have someone, why don't we give her a sticker or a sign to put on the windshield of the truck said, please don't park here if you're not in the area.
You can't, Jack, you guys have to understand that there's only limited areas that are in, these are not in front of people's houses. They're parking in the right of way easement areas where in order to minimize that, I've asked that they move continually to the 4 areas in Wildcat where they can park their trucks. Just like they park on Sterling Oaks Boulevard out here in front of the clubhouse, there's limited areas where these large vehicles can park on any given day.
I realize that.
We've asked them in Wildcat to move from by Mike Kowalski's house over to Larry Porter's house, over to Gus Heavia's, the pool area, and move around in those areas to minimize that parking.
So maybe we
Thank
just
you.
need to make that known to the resident who's has an issue.
Yeah, that's something that Mark can do. In terms of sidewalk maintenance, is that just an operational issue that we feel is part of the ongoing
Yes.
operational issues? Go ahead, Paul.
I think it is an operational issue, but I think it's something that the board should be cognizant of and steer and direct and ask questions about annually. But I think essentially it is operational, but it's something we all should be concerned about. Again, we're 20 years old. The root system is a problem. Most of us have taken walks throughout the community recently and discovered that we have some raises in the sidewalks and it needs to be addressed. I think we've done a good job with that in the past and it's an ongoing program, but I think we all need to be cognizant of the issue.
We just spent $11,000 this past fall on sidewalk repair and maintenance to all of the areas throughout the community that Alan does. That's why you see all the new pavement, all the concrete out there, tearing out those complete sections of sidewalk, cutting out tree limbs that are the size of people's legs from underneath them, and then pouring back all brand new sidewalk. And that is something that we're doing. Anything that can't be done immediately, he grinds down, and this is an ongoing maintenance issue. However, someday he would like to begin installing pavers onto the sidewalk areas, and one of the areas that he thought that would be the best to start at in order to begin this maybe transition over time would be from the tennis court areas. If you're walking into the tennis court from the parking lot, you're on paver paths. And as you turn around, we've started to make a lot of those tennis court paths pavers. He would like to be able to have the entire tennis court area back there pavers. They're much easier to work with, much easier to keep level. When you dig out underneath them, you can clear everything and put the pavers down. They seem to be a lot better to be able to maintain rather than dealing with concrete. He said that if there was someday some way that we could go with pavers down the road, especially in the most traveled areas, it would be a boon to the community, and repairs would be much easier to deal with by just picking up the pavers, taking out the roots and putting everything back down again, rather than ripping out concrete. So strategically, that may be an issue for a 5 to 10-year program to do certain areas within the community over time.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, very good point. Lanny?
I would like to include a recommendation that the sidewalk program be done more than once a year. Again, we have so many people out walking now, and there are, as Paul said, a number of areas that need to be either replaced or shaved. And I think once a year isn't sufficient. I think we need to focus on this at least twice a year.
Chat.
I just want to ask a question to Lanny and Mark. I was under the impression, it's not really a question, but I'm under the impression, Mark and Lanny, that these current sidewalk repairs are done as needed. Is that incorrect? As opposed to once
They're done as needed if we find that there's something that has occurred. However, there is a plan for Alan to go out each year and go through the community, mark off all areas that are of concern, and then begin to address those in all of those neighborhoods. So
Lanny's accurate. It's a once a year walkthrough.
Currently, because of the reserves hold, I think, $11,000 a year for sidewalk repair in them on a yearly annual basis. And he used up every dollar of that this past year.
Lindia.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if this is outrageous question, but is it possible to use those same pavers in the walkways for the intersections on the road?
Yeah, well, roadways, just like the front entrance is all pavered, which are gonna have to be replaced someday.
No, but I'm saying that would bring the eye. You've got the stop sign and then you've got the pavers going across.
That's
You're
an
talking
idea.
about pavers in the street, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm talking about where you cross the street
Yeah.
at the intersections where the stop signs are.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that in lots of places in cities and stuff.
Yeah,
That's
just a
a,
thought.
Good idea.
that's a good one.
Definitely classier than stripes.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so that's any other issues with regarding community safety besides the topics that we've talked about? Paul.
I'll mention here again the extension of the preserved walkway. And as we do this in increments of 100 feet each year, you could set up a park course along the way. So in terms of stations, so people can do stretching exercises or resistance exercises along the way. So not only does it become a kind of a biology class as you walk out there, but you can also use it as a park course. And again, this would be a long-term project, 100 feet a year.
Good, and that would be for the preserve walk. Great.
Right. So it kind of hits two areas.
You know, hand in hand with safety is security. Is there any security issues or concerns for the community right now? Anything with the front entrance protocol coming into the community or the back gate in terms of security issues for safety?
You probably will cover some of that under rent control, rent reform.
Okay.
yeah, I think that the Thames program is almost at the point where it's fully augmented. And when it is, then it'll be an opportunity for us to review it and to see how it's working and whether or not we need to do anything to enhance it. It's not completely done yet, right, Mark?
We're just waiting on the final installation of the pool gate openers. And once that's done, that'll be the end of the access control, yes.
Okay, once we get to that stage, then we can take a look at it and summarize after, a little bit of time to make sure that it's doing what we expect it to do.
Brownie,
No,
go ahead, chap.
To use Jack's word, this is the weeds, in the weeds. But, talking about security, have we done everything we possibly can to convince the quote GPS people, unquote, to direct people who don't know where they're going to the front gate?
That's Google Maps, and we've contacted them. I don't know how many times. Laura spent, I think, a month last year trying to get that done. We just were not able to get them to move off the rock. So I'm not quite sure what can be done about that.
It's funny. I know a number of different communities that have that same issue. So it's a puzzle, but not an easy solution.
Big tech, big
Blue zone
tech.
community. Yes, Lindia.
So I didn't follow through on this, but one day I Googled it. How do you get a change made? And it says that you can go online. Now, I did not do this because I was too lazy, but it says you can go online and you can actually change it yourself. Did anybody try that, Mark?
Laura tried for a month, try to change the business address of Sterling Oaks as it relates to the Google Maps from Old 41 entrance to the US 41 front entrance.
Online, she tried?
She tried for a month, Lindia.
No, I'm just
Calling
saying.
people, going online, trying to drag the map cursors, trying to work with the company, calling Google in California,
Yeah, I
doing
know.
it all.
I know the
Okay.
calls don't work. Yeah, okay. Just wondered.
All right, let's turn to, yes,
So
Jack.
why don't we put a sign up at the back gate that says, if Google Maps sent you here, here's where you have to go.
there is a
That's why
sign
all the-
already.
That's why all the signs back there say, do not enter member only US 41 main entrance for all vendors. They don't read it. They just do what they're gonna do.
There's already a sign, yeah.
Yeah, there's signs there.
All right, so other issues under community wellness, we have the idea of becoming a blue zone community. The blue zone's very popular here in Southwest Florida, and it goes hand in hand with community well-being and health. What are your thoughts about taking some action steps to pursue, at least exploring what actions are needed to become a blue zone designated community? Yes, Paul.
I think we should contact NCH and partner with them in terms of establishing ourselves as a blue zone project. They're taking the lead on that in Southwest Florida, and what better partner could we have? Now, this isn't simply a dining menu. There are 9 particular points with a blue zone project that effectively influences all our residents in one way or another. So I think number one step is to establish a partnership with them and introduce it to the community. And I suspect that it will take hold.
Good. Lanny?
Mark, I thought that that Nicole was already moving on this. Can you give us an update on where we are?
Nicole, from the dining standpoint, we don't have any issues with it. The other 9 points were somebody going out and crossing off the list of taking pictures of bike racks, taking pictures of sidewalks, taking pictures of this, and Nicole is not going to be able to do that. That would require there's a much broader sense of the blue zone community that for her as a staff member to be out there. I think she's working on her section, which she's already produced some of that information, but I think a lot of the other components need to be done through part of the community at large.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's way too much for someone
Walking
like
programs, all this other stuff. Nicole's
Yeah.
not the person to be able to do that.
I see
It
this
should be
as
a
a
grassroots.
separate project team working on this. This is a bigger deal than that.
I think it's
I was just
grassroots.
asking for an update, that's all.
That's all she's got things ready to go from the dining standpoint. Just the
Right.
rest of the stuff needs to be filled out.
So once you establish a partnership with NCH, then there'll be an opportunity to form an ad hoc committee of interested residents to begin the process of getting certified. Lindy,
There-
I'm not sure if this should go under fitness and wellness or blue zone, but at our activities committee meeting, Mary Ann Connolly did volunteer to help us start thinking about possibly a walking group,
Yes,
and which would fit in both categories there. So we'll explore that further with Mary Ann when we have our next meeting. But that's something that she seemed interested in maybe spearheading.
that
So-
is a good blue zone activity. That is one of the things they do.
Right, and it fits in with the fitness and wellness
Right, right.
portion too. So we
Good.
will take a look at that to our activities committee.
Good. Lanny?
There are, yeah.
Lindia, the last time we were talking about this, you had indicated the big holdup for the activities committee on this was the nutrition part of it. Rather than a new project team, since so much of this comes under activities, is this something that activities would be willing to look at again? In terms of the partnership with NCH, that's an automatic process with this. NCH are the ones who process the application. So we already have all the details of what we need to submit for them to review us. We just need someone to do that.
Lanny, I think you need a project team for the Blue Zone project. It is quite detailed. It is quite extensive. And the activities committee would be very glad to look at some things like walking programs or expanding the yoga or anything that fits in under that, aerobics or that sort of thing. But I don't think, I shouldn't speak for them, but I'm pretty sure they aren't ready to take on a big project like that. We're already busy. And I
We're gonna
think
go
a big
Paul and
fire-
then Terry.
I agree with you, Lindia. If we go down this road, I think I'd appoint a project team to handle it. And we'll get representations from various areas. But as I say, there are 9 points to this. So it has a very broad spectrum. So I think a project team could best handle this throughout the community. I don't think we should zero in on food and beverage or activities. It goes way beyond that. So I think a project team would be apropos.
Go ahead, Terry, you have something to add?
Yeah, as far as adding to the activities community, it seems to me that although we are limited in our fitness center because of the size, that we may take a look at our courtyard and see if we can develop activities like Zumba, yoga, dance, aerobics to be done outside and have that in an organized fashion. We don't need to have the space indoors to be able to do these activities. And it would add an additional amount of well-being activities to the ones that we have already.
Good.
I agree.
I agree, Terry.
So let's continue our discussion then on fitness and wellness. So as Terry's introducing, looking at introducing more group classes that we take advantage of the space on the lawn would be one way of being able to provide that to a greater level. Mark.
Those are all, I think that's an admirable and would be great. Let's just say that Zumba class outdoors is on Thursdays at 9 a.m. On the lawn. It's blowing wind. I want to move inside. Can't because there's something else going on inside. Well, what about next week? Well, I mean, there has to be, we found with yoga that yoga would like to do outdoors, but we find that during the winter months that a lot of times that The weather is just not quite acceptable for specific outdoor events of that nature. So they are inside, and we have to schedule that inside space to be able to be accommodating for them. I just think that when, I think it's a great thing to be able to do in outdoor classes. I think that we have a great spot to be able to do it in. We just have to recognize that there may be limitations to that scheduling because of the size of the actual house that we live in.
Lindia, then Terry, then Jack. Go ahead, Lindia.
Okay, so I think one of the things we have to be concerned about here is that if we hire an outside instructor, which we did with yoga, you have to make sure that they are insured. And when you do that, there's this limitation then of the number of people that are willing to come here, and you have to pay them separately outside of the club. It did not run through the club. Well, and they have to be guaranteed a certain number of students usually, or clients. So some of these that Terry mentioned, or Paul, whoever mentioned them, if we could have our own people volunteer to lead it, just like water aerobics. Water aerobics meets, if it's too cold, they don't. If it's raining, they don't. They just
Right.
sort of know. And our people could just sort of know that if it's too cold, we're not meeting. And if there's no money involved, no insurance involved, and we have volunteers who would just kind of lead the aerobics or lead the whatever it is. And I'd be careful about dancing on uneven grass. I have trouble walking across the floor sometimes, but anyway, I just think we could do it with volunteers, and maybe we need to develop a group of volunteers for some of these, meditation or whatever. A lot of things.
I agree with all of that.
So our topic is the need to explore a greater variety and frequency of group classes, just as a broad general topic. Within that, there's some really specific issues: location, who would be providing the classes. That are a lot of good points that we need to look into. Lanny, and then I'll go back to Terry and Paul.
I wanted to address the point that Lindia briefly mentioned, and that is the surface that people are working on. From a liability standpoint, if we're not working on a safe surface, we're going to be potentially exposed to issues of injuries and liabilities. And wanted to point out that this is a potential activity for a second floor covered veranda. If we were to develop the footprint expansion of the building, that if that area were flexible in terms of furniture and space, that could be an area where we would put in a safe flooring that would be available for dance, as well as calisthenics, et cetera, have some limitation, but also add the shade coverage, which I think would be a real limiting factor in the summer for Zumba out on the grassy area.
I agree with all that, but I learned a new term this year. It's called exculpatory. So if we did something on the lawn, we could always have that clause so people could sign off. Unless, of course, we had that platform up above, and that would be preferable. But I think basically the bottom line is, let's do something on the lawn.
Right, so we're going to have short-term and long-term, planned steps in terms of enhancing group fitness classes. So some of the short-term might involve outside on the lawn. Long-term could be, looking down the road of any other clubhouse enhancements. All right, who else wanted to comment on this? Terry.
Yeah, one of the things that Lanny pointed out, the fact that the grass and the cement may have a problem over time. If we're able to put in a tiki bar, a fire pit, adjacent to that, we could also have pavers, which would enable us to do all of the features outside that we care to have. And would be a heck of a lot cheaper than putting up a facility upstairs.
Okay, thank you. Jack?
So we have the trouble with multi-use spaces in this community, as my wife has observed when she does yoga indoors and we have to move chairs around. We're going to have a covered patio structure next to the cabana for next season. That's a perfectly fine surface, but you got to move tables and chairs around. So there are places to do these things. We just have to be a little more inventive on how we more carefully consider alternate uses in spaces.
Very good. Okay, so we were addressing and we got down to the weeds a little bit in terms of group fitness classes. In terms of enhancements to the fitness programs, we have a new fitness center with, that's limited in its size, but there was positive feedback in terms of the variety of equipment and the maintenance and the quality of the equipment. But we know that in terms of younger generations moving into the community, that fitness is of increasing importance. So what other types of fitness related issues do we need to discuss? Paul?
Well, I think if we look at the survey and we look at the concerns, and from what we know that the fitness center is probably constrained. I think if we're looking at a long-term strategic initiative, we should be looking at a larger fitness space. That fitness space may be contiguous to what we have now, or it may be in a different spot. But I think based on the survey and based on what we've learned over the last few years, I think the community could benefit from a larger fitness area.
Right, so there's more space for free weights or stretching and things of that nature. And of course, if it's going to be comprehensive, then there could also be a room dedicated for group fitness classes as part of that discussion.
Right. Now this is, again, it's long-term, 3 to 5 years out. But I think if we're thinking strategically, we need to think in terms of increased space.
Other comments and thoughts in terms of fitness in that regard? So we've talked about group classes, we talked about long-term in terms of space requirements, and we've talked about something that's already going into place already, which relates to blue zones, but adding some types of group activities like walking groups or bicycling groups as other types of fitness related activities. Any other thoughts with fitness?
Yeah, I got a crazy idea.
Okay.
Again, we're getting down into some weeds, but it goes back to things we've discussed ever since we decided to come up with the compromise plan for the clubhouse renovation. But anyway, what I'll say is this, and this is back to bigger fitness. If we could find a way to move the tennis operation out of the building, you could knock that wall down and make the current multi-purpose room a big fitness center and move the multi-purpose room upstairs to where the tennis office is. And the thing that's preventing us from even considering that is what I've been led to believe is the impossibility of moving the tennis operation out of the clubhouse. Just a bee in your bonnets. That's all I'll say.
Well, I think that's what we just said in terms of looking for additional space. There are a lot of things that could go on the table. That's one of them. So the details of the plan is something we need to work out.
I just wanted to put a bee in your bonnet again on this one. That's all.
Lydia.
So always in my mind, I thought we would move the tennis, but how nice it would be on a long-term plan, maybe not awful long, to have an addition to the tiki bar. So you'd have their tennis shop, you're all attached or nearby, so that you had a social area with your tennis and for the tennis people to go in, and then right over to the tiki bar. I mean, I always thought that would have been an ideal place, so that was a hub where people would meet. You could pick up the bocce balls at the tennis shop. I mean, there are just so many things you could do there if it was all together out on that lawn. And then you'd have your upstairs for extra cards or for aerobics or for fitness classes. It would have been such a nice situation.
I think
Just my
that's an
thoughts.
excellent point. I think when we discuss the options and exploration for the cabana enhancements, that's something that should be part of that discussion, because as you said, it could add to the footprint and available space within the clubhouse by doing so. So that could be a really good creative idea that we should.
Could I add one thing, Jerry? Is there some way we can separate the word cabana and tiki bar, or can we call the existing one name so that people know what we're talking about? Like are we talking about the old cabana, or are we talking about having a new cabana? Can that be two separate terms?
Yes, it should be.
Yeah, we should do that.
We could call it Plan A.
No, I suggest,
Cabana,
You're not
suggest
helping,
we-
Mark.
Cabana is current, Tiki is new.
no,
Okay.
tikis are generally smaller than cabanas. I suggest that the new one be an outdoor bar and grill, because that's what we're talking about it being.
Call it something, have a name for it completely different.
Outdoor dining, yeah, name it. Let's give it a name. Tommy Bar.
Outdoor bar and grill.
Yeah,
It
we
could
could,
We can change it.
Everybody
We
uses
used to have
the current
used to have the
structure
oak
is
dining
known
room.
as the cabana.
Yeah.
Now, Lanny's point that a tiki generally meant to represent something smaller than a cabana. So we can call a new structure an outdoor bar and grill for right now as a working title. And the current structure, which everybody knows as the cabana, we'll continue to call that as the cabana. Terry?
Fine with me.
Yeah, I disagree. Reason why I do is that we've been talking about a tiki bar now for about 3 years. And
well, you could put a slash there, Terry. Outdoor bar and grill.
I don't have a problem with adding a slash, but when you put down tiki bar, people already have something in their mind.
Mhm.
And, it's not like it was built yesterday. It's been in planning now for 3 years.
Again, as I referred to it as a working title. This is not necessarily what we will refer to it at the point that it's a new structure that actually gets built. But for our discussion purposes, to avoid confusion, it's just a simple, an outdoor bar and grill is a very generic title. So it just helps to keep in our minds what to differentiate between the two structures. But to your point, Terry, what it's ultimately called can be, a nice name that everybody can get enthused about. Lanny.
Terry, I just want to point out that for many people, Tiki Bar means Jim Moxley's Tiki Bar that was considered as part of Plan B. Your Tiki Bar is very different than Jim's, but there's not one Tiki Bar proposal out there. And I think that it is confusing as to, whether you're talking about a $20,000 tiki bar or a $1 million tiki bar.
Well, you're looking at a structure that was not to include a kitchen, et cetera, in Jim Moxley's plan.
I know.
In my plan, it is included, and it is a much more substantial edifice.
Hey, listen, I don't want to get bogged down on what we call something. I mean, simply, we can just call it A and B and just, and we just, so we know how we're differentiating between the two. We're running out of time for today. So before we end this morning, I want to talk about what we propose for going forward in completing these documents. We had a really good thorough discussion today on landscaping improvements and on community well-being. And I was taking notes throughout, and I'm going to take that and create the first draft of filling in some of those cells. Now, some of the cells we haven't talked about in terms of who would be responsible or when we would like to see some of these steps done. And of course, some of these items would involve some sub-steps as well. So I'm going to give you something that'll represent a draft to go forward, and it'll help you understand what still needs to be done to complete these first two strategic priorities. But going forward, we need to come up with our plan of how best to fill out each of these templates for the rest of our topics, such as irrigation and the cabana enhancements and, renter reforms. So should we continue to do it as a large group? Are you satisfied with this? Or should we break it out into small groups who can come up with the first draft and then bring it to the whole committee to then discuss and look at how to best complete the cell? Terry?
I feel comfortable with this format because what happens as we develop each level of this, we get the divergent points of view right on topic, rather than having somebody come in with a 2 or 3 committee program and then have to go through the dialogue anyway. Even though this may take a little more time, the fact that we're doing it at one time gives everybody the opportunity to address the issues as they come up, rather than having to react to something that is presented over the course of time. I feel more comfortable in this setting.
Okay, I appreciate that. But as you pointed out, that will require us to meet more frequently as an entire group. But you have this complete shared understanding of everybody being involved from the beginning. Others' viewpoints with regard of how best to go forward. Paul?
I would concur with Terry.
Okay, good.
Me too.
Okay. So going forward then, I'm going to try to fill in some of the cells, but there'll be some cells still to be filled out. That will be for the first 2 strategic priorities. We have a total of 7 of them. So some of them are more time intensive. That's why we focused on our first 2 priorities today. So in future meetings, we might be able to accomplish 3, optimistically, maybe even 4, but we will need to continue to meet. So if this day and time works, I would encourage us to just say that till we complete the document, we try to have an ongoing meeting every, Thursday from 9 to 11, until we are satisfied that we have a complete strategic plan that will serve as a guide, a motivator, and is something that we can see that is implementable. Paul?
I agree with that. Why don't we go with Mark, and then I want to discuss one more item under fitness before we leave the area.
Okay. Mark?
I guess that one of the questions I have is, we have the 7 items. It's a long-term strategic plan. Are there items that are in the 7 areas that are going to be not as crucial to get started in the next 6 months, but they are better, in other words, are there some things we want to start to eat a part of this elephant a little at a time and save some of it for later on, so that you have this prioritized time period? In other words, or do we have to like all 7 things have to be started? We've got them all lined up. I just feel like some of them may be more important to people than others, either within our group here or with the community at large. And do we want to say, these are the 2 or 3 crucial things that we probably should really get our hands on and begin to work on over this, if we go, let's say we go through the summer a little bit and develop this, and then in the fall, we have the group going. Hopefully we're a little bit back more to normal. We can have project teams, we can have more community response on if we want to go this way or that way on a strategic plan. Does the community feel that we're moving in that direction for these items? And then, but some of the other items may not be as crucial to start as soon as the fall. We could wait till the following spring or summer because of the I guess the size of that issue.
Right, and your point is a really good one, because when we look at each of these separate strategic issues, you can, look at when do we want to begin some of these, and everybody wants to say, well, let's begin them now. But then when we put them all comprehensively together, we could have a lot of things that are right now. So we're going to need to take a broad picture look at some point and say, okay, which of these are more important that we accomplish? And as you're pointing out, with a financial cost attached to them in the next 6 to 12 months, which ones are 12 to 24 months and so on, in terms, especially when it comes to the financial aspects of it. Because we do know that overriding everything in terms of each of these strategic areas, that as a community, we have to be concerned with HOA fees and the costs and the tolerance for some of those cost factors. So while it'd be great to do everything and do it right, regardless of the cost, we have to keep in mind the fees that we are charging to get these things done. Terry?
Yeah, I think that what Mark is saying, and I agree with him, after looking at the 7 or 8 different pieces that we have to the puzzle, probably half of them require some exploration with technical help and experts.
Right.
You deal with them, it's one thing to have 1 or 2 experts at a time, but to deal with 3 or 4 all at one time becomes an initial expense that's pretty enormous. So prioritizing is probably one of the things after we finish all of this that needs to be done, to say, okay, when are we going to do this piece of the puzzle? When are we going to do that piece of the puzzle on down the line? Because there was initial investment in most of these questions that we have.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Paul?
Well, I guess I agree with both of you. I think we need to move forward, complete the plan, then take a look at what we can do and what is not reasonable to do right now. I think it's obvious we can't do it all, but I think the intent here is to map out a plan, a long-term plan, 3 to 5 years. That's our job with this project. So let's take a look at what lies ahead of us 3 to 5 years down the road and prioritize it. Certainly, we're not going to do all of it at once. That wouldn't make sense. But I would not want to interrupt the process at this point.
Very good. All right, and Paul, you said you wanted to add one other thought regarding fitness.
Yeah, regarding fitness, with this whole pandemic, it's taught us some things, and it's going to change the way we operate down the road. And I think we need to look at our current staff and maybe begin to reassign some of what they do. And some of what they will need to do more of is clean, disinfect, be very careful about where our residents go, what they touch, what they do on a daily basis. And I think rather than hiring more staff to take care of health issues in the future, we may need to consider reassigning some of the staff we do have to go about and disinfect, clean, to make sure that all CDC requirements are in fact in place throughout the community here, at least the parts that we can control. So I think that needs to be, it goes beyond the fitness center. It goes into the clubhouse, it goes to even the bocce court. It goes all over. And if we do the things we should be doing down the road, given this pandemic and what it's taught us, we should be hiring staff unless we reassign the staff that we do have. So I think we need to consider that and think about that. And somehow,
under the heading of community well-being, we need to look at our staffing levels and job descriptions and staff assignment.
Right.
In terms of how do we create policies and procedures to ensure that we have an environment that is safe in addressing the COVID-19 for using the facilities.
Right.
Good. Terry, you're going to add something?
Yes, Paul just mentioned something that just perked my interest. I had dinner for the first time out yesterday, which was kind of cool. And I come to understand that there's an IUV ray portable unit that is used to sanitize commercial structures. And I'm wondering if that's something that we ought to look into because it does the job completely and is an easy way to do it. I just don't know what it costs.
Michael, are you familiar?
No, not at all.
There was an
It's
article in the
typically
Naples.
used in the hospitals.
Yeah, there
Yes.
was an article in the Naples Daily News yesterday about a machine that NCH was allowing restaurants to use.
Correct.
Just what Terry was describing.
Yes. Just wondering, whether it's something that could resolve it because it's done very quickly when nobody's around because you can't use it with people around because it needs to have just a person that's using it, nobody else in the area. So it would be like at night or after hours or something like that.
But again, we're going to have to develop a plan and procedures of how staff jobs are going to change to address the need to ensure that all the facilities are clean. Lindia.
Yes, I just have a question for Mark. I know that in the air conditioning systems, they can put that system in. It's not probably the same that cleans surfaces or anything, but it's the UV rays or that go right in the air conditioner. Do we have that in our air conditioner systems
Yes.
here?
I do, and
That's from mold.
we put them in the new Aeon system that was just put into the new clubhouse for specifically that reason.
And does
We
it
wanted-
also clean the air? Because
It
pure
does.
air, yeah.
Because I've got it at my house. I've got the UV lights in my unit, and it not only knocks out all the mold and everything else, creates the ozone, but it also
Clean air.
maintains the integrity of the machine so that I don't have to get it cleaned as much.
Right, and there's another thing called pure air. I just saw one in a home a couple of days ago. And that's a system that they put in it and it cleans the air. So.
Okay.
just a
Okay,
thought.
so 9 o'clock next Thursday. Is that okay for everybody? Lanny?
I recommend we skip next week. We've got a board meeting at 1.
You do
Don't we?
on the 14th?
I had it on my calendar. Is that not the case?
Yeah,
That's what you just approved in the mass email, Mark.
Right. I have,
Well,
I
we may have
have
to
a,
retract that because I thought that was going to be on the 21st.
All right, we can move the board meeting to the 21st if it's okay with everyone. And we
It's up
can
to
go
you
with the
folks.
14th for this meeting.
Or we can have this in the morning and then the board meeting at 1 o'clock.
no.
I have a commitment next Thursday morning because I didn't think we'd be doing this since we were doing a board meeting.
Well,
And I have
Brownie, didn't you say that Thursday mornings are bad for you also?
Yeah, I have a commitment next Thursday morning also. Okay.
How
Wait,
about
wait.
Wednesday?
I can do Wednesday.
I think we need to, we're talking about a 3 to 5 to 10 year plan. I don't think meeting necessary every week. We have the board meeting next Thursday. Let's just have this next meeting Thursday after next, okay? I think,
Well,
I
it's
don't
not
know what
that
the
hard to do,
urgency is to
Ron.
work out a 10-year plan week by week, okay? I just don't see the urgency. We've got plenty of things to do that we already know about. So what's the big hurry?
The big hurry is we've been doing this for over a year, Brownie, and we're
But Paul,
making.
that doesn't answer my question.
Well, let me
That's not an
finish.
answer. That's not an answer.
Let me finish my answer.
Okay.
We've been doing this for over a year. It's not like we're rushing, number one. Number two, we're making very good progress on this. And at this rate, we should be able to wrap this up by the end of the month. So my proposal is let's keep going and let's complete the plan. We're very close to it. We're close to the finish line. Let's not walk through. Let's just finish our job. It's
Well-
not that hard to do, and we're
Why-
making very good progress.
Well, who set the plan that we have to finish a 5-year plan at the end of May of this year? I mean, that's the point I'm making. Where did that come from? I don't
It's
think the
come-
board
I'll
ever
take
bought into the fact
responsibility
that this
for
is
that,
something we
Brownie.
need to get finished in a couple of weeks.
I'll take responsibility for that.
I know,
I'm-
but
I'm-
I think you ought to open, maybe I'm off base, but I think we're a little bit overkilling this. What is the big rush? A couple of months later, no big deal. We're talking about a multiple year plan.
I think we're making
Value in
good
keeping
progress.
momentum going though.
And from week to week, we remember what we say
Right.
and we're following through, and we have the plan, we have the format, and I think we're doing fine. To postpone this even a month from now, we're catching up, we're digging out the plan. Where were we? What did we do? And it's just too much to catch up. I
Well,
think we're making good
I would
progress.
ask for some other comments of the board meetings. Maybe I'm off base. Does everybody else agree we should be meeting every week and get this done by the end of the month?
I agree.
Chap and Lindia.
I don't think the issue is a rush to the finish line. I think the issue right now is simply scheduling meetings. I don't see any reason why, when we're hot, we're hot. Let's get this done.
Yeah.
I agree with Paul.
I agree.
Okay.
And we don't have to do it on a Thursday and we don't have to do it in the morning. So I
That's
mean,
why I say the only issue is
We're all happy
scheduling
with it.
meetings. That's the only issue.
Let's do it Wednesday morning.
Let's ask Brownie, what's a good time for Brownie?
Well, I told Paul that Thursday mornings, not every Thursday, but do tend to be, I do have a regular meeting on some Thursdays, not every Thursday.
Mhm.
I have no.
Well, we can move
we
it.
should
I'm
be able to
not saying
change
it
that.
has to be Thursday. Let's do Wednesday
How about Friday morning?
or Friday. I don't care.
Wednesday's good for me.
I cannot do Friday.
I propose
now
next.
on the
I
table is
propose-
next
I propose
Wednesday at
next
9
Wednesday
a.m.
at
to
9
11.
o'clock. I
Who
propose
may-
next
who cannot
Wednesday at
make
9
next
o'clock.
Wednesday at 9 to 11?
But I think with the virus and all, we should go ahead and the priority ought to be to have the board meeting next Thursday.
Yeah, right. So let's do this
Particularly
Wednesday.
because there's a lot of things we need to talk about, you know, what's happening with the virus and everything.
Okay, so can we do Wednesday and Thursday? Is that too much?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good with me?
Okay. So for our strategic plan, we're going to meet next Wednesday from 9 to 11. And then your board member meeting will be next Thursday afternoon, correct?
Yes.
Well,
Right.
we have an option. We could move it to the Friday after, or we could do it on that Thursday. I'll leave it to you all.
I think we ought to do it next Thursday. We've got a couple of unresolved issues that need to be addressed sooner rather than later. Specifically, what I'm talking about, Paul, is we have TBD when it comes to a pool reopening, and we have a TBD when it comes to dining. I think we need to put, I think we need to decide something.
What
Okay,
are the
agree.
dates? What are the dates?
To be determined.
Lanny,
I prefer the 14th also. I specifically didn't schedule my surgery next week so I could be at the board meeting. And I don't know how I'll be doing on the 21st.
okay, so are we all good with the 13th and 14th?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Cezanne and Mark, if you could announce those dates, schedule them, that's what we'll do.
How many
Thank you.
units did we have this today?
Again,
How many
I didn't-
units did we have?
I don't know, because I didn't, I turned it off because of that back and forth redundancy. When
Oh,
it's
okay.
I had to turn it off because you can't get the
There's
audio working.
15 right now.
15, yeah, we had
Okay.
16 to 18 last time. The board
Okay,
meeting gets more because it's more, you know, they think we're gonna talk
More
about more
current.
stuff. that
Yeah,
we're
it's
gonna
more
spend.
current.
Okay, any final
Okay.
thoughts?
I have one question, Jerry.
Okay,
As I was looking over the final report, I noticed that we ended up with irrigation as one of the 7 things that indicators. And as I looked at the survey results, there was very little that addressed irrigation. You turn to page 41 on the final report, it seemed very weak responses. And it was 12th on the rankings list. In fact, it was almost equal to excursions in the community and cornhole, very close to that. And I'm
Right.
wondering how that ended up as one of the key considerations that we had to deal with in this strategic plan. To me, I think changes to if you look at page 26, we had many more comments about what this board should do and the character of the board and the direction of the board than irrigation upgrades. So I'm a little perplexed as to how we ended up with irrigation as one of the main issues in the community when the community didn't really respond to it. And the survey is supposed to drive this strategic plan, and the homeowners are to direct us in terms of their concerns. And it's very weak in terms of the final report and where we're going with this. And I think half of the community, more than half of the community, doesn't really care about it. So I'm wondering how we ended up with that.
a couple of thoughts, but I'll go ahead. I'll let Chap had his hand up first, and I'll go to you, Brownie, and then Terry.
I guess I'll admit to you, Paul, that I think we're letting, I think we're overriding the survey feedback by having irrigation on the key strategic
That's my
priorities
impression.
list. But we all know that it is a smoldering issue that we need to address, survey or no survey. So I think I was pretty much the one that pushed for this as a separate issue, simply because I believe it is a smoldering issue that needs to be talked about. That's all.
Brownie.
Yeah, I'll just echo, that's my point. The community doesn't realize we may have pipes that are going to corrode. So it is a smoldering, I think that was a good word, issue that we have the responsibility, and it is a long-term expensive item. So just because the board, the community may not realize it, we should not ignore it, okay?
Right, and similarly, a Clubhouse Kitchen is another item where residents don't recognize that there's issues with the kitchen because they never see the kitchen, but the board has that understanding when there's needed changes for, say, a kitchen in a clubhouse. I'll go to Terry and then to you, Lanny.
Yeah, I just wanted to parrot what Chap had said, because I put that up as a high priority. And the way I look at it, it unfortunately is unseen by many people because it's underground. And in addition to that, you have all of the pumps and so forth that go along with it. And the fact how old they are just adds to a question as to how much longer can we expect them to last? And is it worthwhile to continually patch and fix up, or is it something that we need to replace? And that's just a logical explanation, even though most of the people don't look at it because they just don't see it.
Right, right.
Lanny?
First of all, we made a mistake of not putting irrigation specifically as a line item in the survey. And we agreed before that going by comments was not a way we were going to determine priorities. We also discussed how irrigation is part of landscaping, and we do know that 83% of the community support improvements to landscaping, and we cannot improve landscaping if we don't have adequate irrigation. And adequate irrigation, I think, is a significant portion of the problem for irrigation in many of our medians. So I think there is data as much as can be there because of our mistake.
I want to go back to Paul now that you had a chance to hear from your fellow board members.
Well, you're going to have to bring me along on this issue, and I need a clarification of what the problem is. Because I'm not quite sure. I understand that things are old, they break down, but I also understand that if it breaks down in your property, you ask Brightview or in the past Leo to fix it, and they would fix it and they'd give you a bill, just as if you got a plumber come to your house. So I don't know why that just can't continue. I don't know the scope or the expanse of the issue. To me, it doesn't make any sense.
Well,
But then so I'm asking you to help me understand the problem and the issue.
Give me
well,
an
I could say we could just table this and make that the first discussion at our session next week.
Good.
We can decide at that time
Good
whether it
idea.
needs to be a separate strategic issue or that we should fold it into landscaping improvements.
I think it needs better definition.
Sound
too.
good to everybody? That
Yeah.
we'll table it and we'll begin our discussion next week with looking at irrigation, and then as part of that discussion, decide whether it should be part of landscaping or remain a separate strategic issue.
Right, and let's clarify the problem
Okay.
specifically, because it's very muddy to me.
Well, the problem,
That's the problem.
good. The problem is,
Fun.
I don't want to hear it now.
The
Next
problem
week.
is
is
next
soon
week.
enough.
the problem is unknown.
Well,
No,
all the
I
more
think
reason to
we do.
clarify it.
We do actually know some of it. Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
All right, next
All right, we
week.
will talk about it next week then.
right.
Any other final thoughts? Great participation as always today. We made a lot of good progress. I will be sending out a updated draft by Monday afternoon in preparation for our meeting on Wednesday.
Very good.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Can we
Thanks,
ask
Paul.
Jerry to leave? We ask Jerry to leave for a second?
Sure.
Wait, let me turn off the YouTube.
Jerry, good job today.